G'day everyone, welcome to a very windy life on the hulls. Honestly, the last 2 months here has been insane. The winds, we've had gale forced offshore westerly winds, just horrendous conditions, and any chance of demoulding this has just been put off by continuous wind. Now this week, you can see I've still got the tent over my deck mould here, and this week I'm going to grind off the flange and get back to the raw edge of the mould, which is going to make release a lot easier. I'm going to be able to get wedges in around the flange of the boat and start to demold this this beast. But for now, I know you're all getting a little bit tired of the deck mould, but ultimately the deck is actually finished. This week also I'm going to put in some lifting mounts. Now it's going to get complicated, it's going to get difficult, and the logistics of getting this thing out of the mould and in there, hanging over the top of my hull, are just monumental and doing my head in, to be honest. And right now we're in COVID lockdown, so I can't even get anyone to help me. But for now I'm going to take you in and just show you where I'm at in here. This is finished. So as you can see, it's finished, and I'm pretty bloody happy. And I've also got quite a bit of release. You can see here, that's the boat, that's the mould, a couple of wedges. Look at that, starting to come out, and I've heard a few cracks as I've lifted it out of the mould. So very exciting, but it does have to wait for a little while because I've got so much to do in there, and that's a list of monumental proportions on its own. Just getting prepared inside the hull to make sure that I can float this thing in and hover it over the top. I know there's a lot of excitement out there amongst you guys, but you're just gonna have to wait a while. I've got a lot to do in there. I've got bathrooms to fit, I've got mast posts to assemble, lots to come in the next few weeks. But for now, let's get straight into it, and I'm gonna grind off the edge of this flange.
This job, like when I did the hull, was a grueling and demanding job with a lot of hazardous dust. Sadly, there's no way around it. So I actioned it on a Saturday in our industrial estate where there was no one around and no chance of the dust affecting bystanders or their cars or anything. Although the dust is airborne, I've always tried to mitigate any dust escaping, but sadly in this case, it's nearly impossible to contain it. It was about a 2-hour exercise, and one that I don't ever have to repeat again.
Well, that was pretty shitty. That sucked. That's about 2 hours it's taking me to get it back to the mould edge. I'm just going to go around with a flap disc and tidy it up because it's a bit rough, but it always is. In fact, when I did the hull, it took me, I remember now, it was 2 days to get it all tidied up, but I'm going to try and knock this off in the next hour or so. So wish me luck. Let's get into it. So the other day I was here and I ground all of the flanges all the way around the deck here, and I noticed it's a little bit thin at the front here. I'd actually neglected to add a little bit of bulk that I'm going to need right along the bow here. Now this area here has a lot of stress under it, particularly because the head saw and everything is actually mounted to this area, and because I don't have an aluminium beam or a forebeam on this particular boat, we have a solid bridge deck. I want to make sure this is as strong as possible because I'm relying on foam and structure to support the foundations of the actual boat. So what I've got to do is I've just done an extra 2 layers of 1215 quad along here, and then a 300 CSM just on the top with peel ply, just to give it a beautiful finish, so that it's going to aid in me joining the hull and the deck through the hatches. It's going to be interesting because I've got to actually reach from there up into there and tab the hull and the deck together once I glue it down, screw it down, and then I've got to physically get the glass into each of these compartments that are running lengthways along the front of this boat. So this edge here is actually going to get another 2 layers of 1215 quad and then a 300 CSM, giving me that nice smooth peel plied finish ready to join to the hull. I'm trying to preempt a lot of work here. Once this deck is in on top of the hull, it's going to be very, very hard to action any work here. So I'm actually spending a lot more time here than I would do upside down, head down inside a small hatch, smaller than my shoulders, to get the final product done.
I spend the bulk of my days trying to work out how to do things, and demoulding this deck is simply doing my head in. Although a long way off, the process starts now, and although we're all eager to see this thing fly, there are so many things that need attention before this can happen. Deciding where to place them and how to lift the deck is a concern because there's very little solid glass with which to attach some mounts to. Starting with some cardboard templates that have formed plywood mounts, shaped and tabbed into place in strategic locations, taking into account weight distribution, access, and reducing the chance of damage to the deck in the initial lift, the subsequent flipping and secondary lift to hover over the hull structure.
Alright, that's looking pretty good. I think if I can get this curve right, then I'll have it supported here at the solid glass hull side. What I don't want to do is lift it here and have this flopping around, and certainly I need to support it when it actually gets flipped over onto its upright position, and instead of being upside down. As I flip it over, I don't want to stress the side of this because this is only solid glass. It's not really going to achieve its strength until it is physically joined to the hull.
So these plywood gussets that I'm making here will be tabbed in place and initially sprayed with vinyl ester to soak into the wood prior to the tabbing. It's so important. Often I see people laminating straight onto marine ply or CD ply, construction ply, and the physical first resin layer should be allowed to really soak in and form a bond to the wood rather than your secondary laminate then going straight onto an otherwise piece of dry wood. I always allow for that wetting out process, and that applies to epoxy, polyester and vinyl ester all alike. You must wet out the plywood.
Oh, ouch. So I'm going to actually bead some epoxy underneath some Techniglue. It's such a good epoxy, and then I'm going to put some pipes through here, I think, but I'll get these gussets put in place. As you can see, it's going to support the side here when it's lifted as well, because what I don't want is any damage done to that solid glass member there. And I've used the composite angle covered in sticky tape or in Durex or whatever you call it, packing tape, just so it doesn't glue. And I'm going to run a bead along the bottom of here and just sit it down, screw it in place, leave it there for the night, come back tomorrow, and then I'll start to tab it in. Getting these tabbed in is going to be pretty critical to getting the strength. Same deal down the back here. got this one here, and it's reinforced by this upright here, so it's a very strong lifting position, and then the one over in the corner there. So this composite angle just needs a couple of little locators here to stop them falling over while they set, and then overnight that'll cure. I'll come in tomorrow and get working on the lifting mounts. Now I've got to prepare the surface here. It is peel ply, so I've just removed all the peel ply for around the area that I'm going to use this epoxy. But importantly, you don't clean it with styrene this time. You're going to have to use acetone, because with epoxies, styrene has absolutely no benefit, whereas a slight quick wipe with acetone will in fact make sure that surface is keyed. It is polyester, it's fully cured polyester, it's peel plied, so it doesn't really need any further prep apart from a quick sand and essentially a quick wipe with acetone. I'm ready to put epoxy down onto the surface underneath this bulkhead. So I'll get mixing and we'll get into it. It's a fast hardener in this one, so hopefully by tomorrow morning when I come in, it's going to get down to 0 tonight, so I'm still working in around about 15-16 degrees in here. Hopefully in the next 2 or 3 hours it'll kick. Might have to leave it till tomorrow afternoon before I start to work on it, but you know, I think I'm pretty good, and I'm going to do all of them hopefully with this one bag. I might have to mix up a bit more, but you know, these are pretty simple things I can do to make sure that I'm ready to go tomorrow to get this tabbing complete. Now all this is going to be ground off when I demold this boat. This here, this gusset here, it's going to have quite a lot of force on it because we've got a big flat plate that needs to be lifted vertically, and I've got to get it up over that rear cockpit mouldings because that's quite a complicated shape, more so than the hull in fact, and a lot of more chances for catching and obviously catch points and lack of release because it is a lot of vertical surfaces. There's no real relief there. Typically we'd aim for about 3 degrees of release angle to make sure it's going to lift. I'm not convinced that most of that isn't almost vertical. In fact, if not, the back wall is, but certainly the side parts tend to have a little bit of relief in them. So hopefully it's not going to be as bad as I think it is, but you know, only time will tell on the day. But what I have to do here is I basically just got CD ply. It's just basic structural ply. Now it's only a fillet of epoxy along the bottom. I'm actually going to now laminate some tabbing, tons of tabbing, and probably 3 or 4 layers of tabbing on here to make sure that I get a good grip. And then I'm going to try to tie it in together with some screws and bolts just to make sure that it's not going to separate from the wood as we pull this up. And then I'll probably put in a couple of little wooden braces as well, like I did back up on the hull. Importantly, when you're laminating plywood like this, you must put resin on and let it soak in. So I've sprayed the area here that I'm actually going to laminate, and that's now soaking in. I'm giving it a good 10 minutes or so just to get it soaked in and make sure that I'm actually not bonding to
the resin that I'm actually bonding to the wood. So the more I let that soak in, the better. And it's just going to be a bit of a process getting these 4 mounts done. And then I've got to consider how, in God's name, I'm going to lift it when the mould actually, or the deck actually gets flipped over, how I'm then going to pick it up. And I think I've got a solution with the hatches. I think a couple of steel bars might be involved, just simply glassed in or glued in for the final lift up onto the deck, but that's a long way. But anyway, I'm going to get in and laminate these tabs in, hopefully get them all done the Savo, so that tomorrow I can come in and put in some additional braces, because we're going to have a bit of an upward force pulling on these as well as a side force. I'm going to be able to use a spreader bar, and I've aimed these mounts probably about 1 metre to either side of the spreader bar, so I'm keeping that strap angle or the chain angle at around 60 degrees, which is very important to make sure I'm lifting vertically, not pulling sideways and tearing these mounts out of the deck mould. Righto, so I've got a quick job. I've already wetted out the main central bulkhead, this 25mm Australian marine ply, beautiful piece of wood, I've got to say. It's very nice to work with, because it's just good quality, other than, unlike this bulkhead here, which is that Ep181, I mean, it wasn't great quality marine ply. It's incredible the difference in the quality in between shit marine plywood and good marine plywood. This thing is a very good piece of marine plywood. I've already wetted it out. I've soaked the seams with vinyl ester, and that's now tacked off. It's actually gone really nice. Within a couple of hours, it's actually not cured, but it's certainly nice and tacky. That means that we have a bond from the wood to the vinyl. Now I'm going to put on a layer of 600 double bias to finish it off, and peel ply, and that's the spec for this centre bulkhead. Once I get that laminated, I'll then be able to install it. First things first, though, over in there, in that void in there, I have to build some type of mast post that's going to carry the compression of the mast. Now I've got a bit of a plan for it. It's sort of going to be a bit of a complicated one, because it's going to be hard to access it when I glue it in, but it's going to be epoxied in place, and then epoxy laminated, tabbed on all 4 corners inside that triangle there, to make sure that I get that compression right for the mast. Part of the footage I lost when my hard drive crashed was dealing with this bulkhead. Now I've got a major central bulkhead that runs longitudinally along the center line of the boat. It's actually not on the center line. It's actually 20 centimeters or 200mm to the port side, and the reason why that is because the starboard cabin is 20 centimeters longer across the bridge deck, giving us room for a queen size bed and a bit of an odd shaped angle. You know, it is at 45 degrees to the central motion of the boat. But this laminate here is probably one of the most structural components of the boat. It's a 25mm Australian hardwood marine ply section, and basically put it in about 6 months ago, before I demolded the hull. So very importantly, by demolding the hull with this in place, I was able to stop any movement of the forward section of the boat, and that probably contributed a bit to its downward facing motion when we lifted it out with the crane. It's now had its full laminate. I laminated this up as part of the footage that I lost, but it's acted as a table for the last month or so while I've been doing some other work up in here. But it's time to get it back in place to start to work out the mast bulkhead region, and that mast bulkhead integrates into the other 2 bulkheads that I have here. So I'm going to actually put this back in place, just sit it in place for now. It is one heavy mother.